Bhakta Sai Maharaj Shri Gurudev ki jai. Nitil Pavishtam Vishnupad Ashtara Shata Shishimar Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Nitil Pavishtam Vishnupad Ashtara Shata Shishimar Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitil Pavishtam Vishnupad Ashtara Shata Shishimar Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Nitil Pavishta Maha Bhagavat Shila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitil Pavishta Shila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nitil Pavishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupano Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath. Shri Jeev Gopal Bhattadash Raghunath Sharda Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. नाम चैश्ला हरिदास ठाकुर की जय. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल व्रज मंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय. सर्व अभिष्ट विरत गिरिराज महाराज की जय. श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जय. श्री यमुना देवी गंगा देवी की जय. श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय. श्री भक्ति देवी की जय. श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाय की जय. गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय. श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Dandavat Pranams Gargaraji, Ganga Didi, and Raseshwari Mataji. And also Indira Mataji, who will be watching a little bit later. Dandavat Pranams, everybody. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo mahavadanyaya Krishna prema pradate Krishnaya Krishna chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Idalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tar Bhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yang Prabrajantam Anupetam Apetya Krityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti tanmayataya taravo bhinedus tang sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Shrinvatang svakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana Ridantasto yabhadrani vidhunoti suhritsatam. Nashta praishvavadreshu nityang bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. Tavai vasmi na jivami tvaya vina. Iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayamam charanantikam. Bhaktya vihina aparada lakshai kshiptashtakama dittaranga madhe. Kripa mai tvam sharanam prapana vrinde namaste charana ravindam. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat pranams Rup Manjari Didi, and Sudevi Didi, and Madhavi Didi. Hari Bol, Dandavat pranams to all of you. Let's change this background. Or if you're attached to it, we can keep it. I don't ever see it, so it doesn't make a difference to me. But how about this one for now? All right. Hearing in brief about Lord Krishna's pastimes, Parikshit Maharaj requested Shukadev Goswami to further elaborate the Lord's nectarian pastimes. Shukadev narrated, once Mother Earth, being overburdened by demoniac forces, took the form of a cow and approached Lord Brahma. Brahma took her and the demigods to the shore of the milk ocean and chanted the Purusha Sukta prayers to please Lord Vishnu. Vishnu pointed out to Brahma in trance that he would soon descend to the earth and ordered the demigods to appear in the Yadu and Vrishni dynasties. When power overpowers love. Kaṁsa, the son of the Bhoja king, Ugrasen, was lovingly driving the chariot of his newly wedded sister Devaki and her husband Vasudeva of the Yadu dynasty. Suddenly, a celestial voice warned Kaṁsa, "You fool! The 8th child of this woman will kill you." Sinful Kaṁsa immediately took up his sword to chop off Devaki's head. But Vasudeva stopped Kaṁsa and tried to pacify him with logic and philosophy. So that's what we're going to read now. Oh, and there's a picture. Let's see. Oops. Here's a picture of, let me put this light up here. There. There, now you can see it. All right. What verses are we reading today? Let me just check 1 second. It's 37 to 53. Okay. Let's read the last 2 verses. Kaṁsa was a condemned personality in the Bhoja dynasty because he was envious and sinful. Therefore, upon hearing this omen from the sky, he caught hold of his sister's hair with his left hand and took up his sword with his right hand to sever her head from her body. Oops. Hey, what's it doing? Okay. What the heck? It's so weird. Okay. Wanting to pacify Kaṁsa, who was so cruel and envious that he was shamelessly ready to kill his sister, the great soul Vasudeva, who was to be the father of Krishna, spoke to him in the following words. Shri Vasudeva Vacha Shlaghaniya Gunashurar Bhavan Bhoja Yashaskara Sa Katang Bhaginim Hanyat Striyam Udvaha Parvani. Vasudeva said, "My dear brother-in-law Kaṁsa, you are the pride of your family, the Bhoja dynasty, and great heroes praise your qualities. How could such a qualified person as you kill a woman, your own sister, especially on the occasion of her marriage? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Vedic principles, a Brahmin, an old man, a woman, a child, or a cow cannot be killed under any circumstances. Vasudeva stressed that Devaki was not only a woman, but a member of Kaṁsa's family. Because she was now married to Vasudeva, she was Parastri, another man's wife. And if such a woman were killed, not only would Kaṁsa be implicated in sinful activities, but his reputation as king of the Bhodra dynasty would be damaged. Thus, Vasudeva tried in many ways to convince Kaṁsa in order to stop him from killing Devaki. Mrityur janmavatang vira dehena sahajayate adyavabda shatante va mrityur vai praninam dhruva. Great hero, one who takes birth is sure to die, for death is born with the body. One may die today or after 100 years, but death is sure for every living entity. Purport. Vasudeva wanted to impress upon Kaṁsa that although Kaṁsa feared dying and therefore wanted to kill even a woman, he could not avoid death. Death is sure. Why then should Kaṁsa do something that would be detrimental to his reputation and that of his family? As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 2.27, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvamamritasya cha tasmad apariharyarte natvam shochitum arhasi. For one who has taken his birth, death is certain. And for one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. One should not fear death. Rather, one should prepare oneself for the next birth. One should utilize one's time in this human form to end the process of birth and death. It is not that to save oneself from death, one should entangle oneself in sinful activities. This is not good. 39. Dehe panchattamapanne dehi karmanugo vashaha dehantaram anuprapya praktanam tyajate vapuhu. When the present body turns to dust and is again reduced to 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the proprietor of the body, the living being, automatically receives another body of material elements according to his fruitive activities. When the next body is obtained, he gives up the present body. Purport. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, which presents the beginning of spiritual understanding. Dehinosmin yata dehe Komaram yovanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuhyati. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. It's Bhagavad Gita 2.13. A person or an animal is not the material body. Rather, the material body is the covering of the living being. Bhagavad Gita compares the body to a dress and elaborately explains how one changes dresses one after another. The same Vedic knowledge is confirmed here. The living being, the soul, is constantly changing bodies one after another. Even in the present life, the body changes from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to youth, and from youth to old age. Similarly, when the body is too old to continue, the living being gives up this body and, by the laws of nature, automatically gets another body according to his fruitive activities, desires, and ambitions. The laws of nature control this sequence, and therefore, as long as the living entity is under the control of the external, material energy, the process of bodily change takes place automatically, according to one's fruitive activities. Vasudeva therefore wanted to impress upon Kaṁsa that if he committed the sinful of killing a woman, in his next life he would certainly get a material body still more conditioned to the sufferings of material existence. Thus, Vasudeva advised Kaṁsa not to commit sinful activities. One who commits sinful activities because of ignorance, tamagun, obtains a lower body. Karanam guno sangosya sad asad yoni janmasu. That's Bhagavad Gita 13:22. There are hundreds and thousands of different species of life. Why are there higher and lower bodies? One receives these bodies according to the contaminations of material nature. If in this life one is contaminated by the mode of ignorance and sinful activities, dushkriti, in the next life, by the laws of nature, one will certainly get a body full of suffering. The laws of nature are not subservient to the whimsical desires of the conditioned soul. Our endeavor, therefore, should be to associate always with sattva-gun and not indulge in rajagun or tamagun, rajastamo bhava. Lusty desires and greed keep the living entity perpetually in ignorance and prevent him from being elevated to the platform of sattva-gun or shuddha sattva-gun. One is advised to be situated in shuddha sattva-gun, devotional service, for thus one is immune to the reactions of the three modes of material nature. Varjangstishtan padaikena yataivaikena gacchati yatatrena jalokaivam dehi karma gatim gata. Just as a person traveling on the road rests one foot on the ground and then lifts the other, or as a worm on a vegetable transfers itself to one leaf and then gives up the previous one, the conditioned soul takes shelter of another body and then gives up the one he had before. Purport. This is the process of the soul's transmigration from one body to another. At the time of death, according to his mental condition, the living being is carried by the subtle body consisting of mind, intelligence, and ego to another gross body. When higher authorities have decided what kind of gross body the living entity will have, he is forced to enter such a body, and thus he automatically gives up his previous body. Dull-minded persons who do not have the intelligence to understand this process of transmigration take for granted that when the gross body is finished, one's life is finished forever. Such persons have no brains with which to understand the process of transmigration. At the present moment, there is a great opposition to the Hare Krishna movement, which is being called a brainwashing movement. But actually, the so-called scientists, philosophers, and other leaders in Western countries have no brains at all. The Hare Krishna movement is trying to elevate such foolish persons by enlightening their intelligence so that they will take advantage of the human body. Unfortunately, because of gross ignorance, they regard the Hare Krishna movement as a brainwashing movement. They do not know that without God consciousness, one is forced to continue transmigrating one body to another. But because of their devilish brains, they will again be forced to accept an abominable life and practically never be able to liberate themselves from the conditional life of material existence. How this transmigration of the soul takes place is very clearly explained in this verse. Swapne yatha pashyati deham idrisham manoratena bhinivishta chetana drishta shrutabhyam manasanuchintayang prapadyate tat kim api hyapasmriti. Having experienced a situation by seeing or hearing about it, one contemplates and speculates about that situation, and thus one surrenders to it, not considering his present body. Similarly, by mental adjustments, one dreams at night of living under different circumstances in different bodies and forgets his actual position. Under the same process, one gives up his present body and accepts another. Tata dehantara praptihi. Purport. Transmigration of the soul is very clearly explained in this verse. One sometimes forgets his present body and thinks of his childhood body, a body of the past, and how one was playing, jumping, and talking, and so on. When the material body is no longer workable, it becomes dust. For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. But when the body again mixes with the 5 material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the mind continues to work. The mind is a subtle substance in which the body is created, as we actually experience in our dreams and also when we are awake in contemplation. One must understand that the process of mental speculation develops a new type of body that does not actually exist. If one can understand the nature of the mind, manodratena, and its thinking, feeling, and willing, one can very easily understand how from the mind different types of bodies develop. The Krishna consciousness movement, therefore, offers a process of transcendental activities wherein the mind is fully absorbed in the affairs pertaining to Krishna. The presence of the soul is perceived by consciousness, and one must purify his consciousness from material to spiritual, or in other words, to Krishna consciousness. That which is spiritual is eternal, and that which is material is temporary. Without Krishna consciousness, one's consciousness is always absorbed in temporary things. For everyone, therefore, Krishna recommends in Bhagavad Gita 9:34, Man mana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. One should always be absorbed in thought of Krishna. One should become his devotee. One should always engage in his service and worship him as the supreme great, and one should always offer him obeisances. In the material world, one is always a servant of a greater person, and in the spiritual world, our constitutional position is to serve the supreme, the greatest, Param Brahma. This is the instruction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jivera Sarupa Hoy Krishnera Nitya Das. Chaitanya Chaitamrita Madhya 2108. To act in Krishna consciousness is the perfection of life and the highest perfection of yoga. As Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 6:47, Yoginam api sarvesham margatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mang same yukta tamo mataha. Of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. The condition of the mind which flickers between sankalpa and vikalpa, accepting something and rejecting it, is very important in transferring the soul to another material body at the time of death. Yang vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tang evaiti konteya sadatar bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one resembles when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. That's Bhagavad Gita 8:6. Therefore, one must train the mind in the system of bhakti yoga, as did Maharaj Ambarish, who kept himself always in Krishna consciousness. Savai mana Krishna padara vindayo. One must fix the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna 24 hours a day. If the mind is fixed upon Krishna's lotus feet, the activities of the other senses will be engaged in Krishna's service. Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate. To serve Hrishikesh, the master of the senses, with purified senses is called bhakti. Those who constantly engage in devotional service are situated in a transcendental state, above the material modes of nature. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 14:26, Mang chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. One must learn the secret of success from the Vedic literatures, especially when the cream of Vedic knowledge is presented by Bhagavad Gita as it is. Because the mind is ultimately controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, the word apasmriti is significant. Forgetfulness of one's own identity is called apasmriti. This apasmriti can be controlled by the Supreme Lord, for the Lord says, Matta smritir gyanam apohanam cha. From me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Instead of allowing one to forget one's real position, Krishna can revive one's original identity at the time of one's death, even though the minds may be flickering. Although the minds may work imperfectly at the time of death, Krishna gives a devotee shelter at his lotus feet. Therefore, when a devotee gives up his body, the mind does not take him to another material body. Rather, Krishna takes the devotee to that place where he is engaged in his pastimes, mam eti, as we have already discussed in previous verses. One's Krishna consciousness, therefore, must always be absorbed in Krishna, and life will be successful. Otherwise, the mind will carry the soul to another material body. The soul will be placed in the semen of a father and discharged into the womb of a mother. The semen and ovum create a particular type of body according to the form of the father and mother, and when the body is mature, the soul emerges in that body and begins a new life. This is the process of transmigration of the soul from one body to another. Tatha dehantara praptihi. Unfortunately, those who are less intelligent think that when the body disappears, everything is finished. The entire world is being misled by such fools and rascals. But as stated in Bhagavad Gita 2:20, Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. The soul does not die when the body is destroyed. Rather, the soul takes on another body. Yato yato dhavati daiva choditang mano vikaratmakam panchasu guneshu maya rochiteshu dehyaso prapadyamana sahatena jayate. At the time of death, according to the thinking, feeling, and willing of the mind, which is involved in fruitive activities, one receives a particular body. In other words, the body develops according to the activities of the mind. Changes of the body are due to the flickering of the mind, for otherwise the soul could remain in its original spiritual body. Purport. One can very easily understand that the mind is constantly flickering, changing in the quality of its thinking, feeling, and willing. This is explained by Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 6:34. Chanchalam hi manashna pramiti balavadridham tasyaham nigraham manye vayor eva sudushkaram. The mind is chanchala, and it changes very strongly. Therefore, Arjuna admitted that controlling the mind is not at all possible. This would be as difficult as controlling the wind. For example, if one were in a boat moving according to the wind on the river or the sea, and the winds were uncontrollable, the tilting boat would be very much disturbed and extremely difficult to control. It might even capsize. What's capsize? Does that mean go underwater? Why is it not coming up? That's so weird. Okay, overturned in the water. The craft capsized in heavy seas. Therefore, in the Bhava Samudra, the ocean of material speculation and transmigration to different types of bodies, one must first control the mind. By regulative practice, one can control the mind, and this is the purpose of the yoga system, Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena. But there is a chance of failure with the yoga system, especially in this age of Kali, because the yoga system uses artificial means. If the mind is engaged in bhakti yoga, however, by the grace of Krishna, one can very easily. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recommended Harer Nama, Harer Nama, Harer Nama Eva Kevalam. It's Adi 1721. One should chant the holy name of the Lord constantly, for the holy name of the Lord is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Person. By chanting the Hare Krishna mantra constantly, one can fix the mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo, and in this way achieve the perfection of yoga. Otherwise, the flickering mind will hover on the platform of mental speculation for sense enjoyment, and one will have to transmigrate from one type of body to another because the mind is trained only in relation to the material elements, or in other words, to sense gratification, which is false. Maya Sukhaya Bharam Udvahato Vimudhan. That's Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 7:9-43. Rascals, Vimudhan, being controlled by mental speculation, make huge arrangements by which to enjoy life temporarily. But they must give up the body at the time of death, when everything is taken away by Krishna's external energy. Mrityu sarva haraschaham. At that time, whatever one has crafted in this life is lost, and one must automatically accept a new body by the force of material nature. In this life, one may have constructed a very tall skyscraper, but in the next life, because of one's mentality, one may have to accept a body like that of a cat, a dog, a tree, or perhaps a demigod. Thus, the body is offered by the laws of material nature. Karanam gunasangosya sad asad yoni janmasu. That's Bhagavad Gita 13:22. The spirit soul takes birth in higher and lower species of life only because of its association with the three qualities of material nature. Urdhvam gachanti sta sattvasta madhye tishtanti rajasa jaghanya guna vritti sta adho gachanti tamasaha. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets. And those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. That's Bhagavad Gita 14:18. In conclusion, the consciousness movement offers the topmost welfare activity for human society. The saner section of human society must therefore take this movement very seriously for the benefit of all humanity. To save oneself from the repetition of birth and death, one must purify his consciousness. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam. One must be freed from all designations. I am an American. I am an Indian. I am this. I am that. And come to the platform of understanding that Krishna is the original master and we are his eternal servants. When the senses are purified and engaged in Krishna's service, one achieves the highest perfection. Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate. The Krishna consciousness movement is a movement of Bhakti Yoga. Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga. By following the principles of this movement, one becomes disassociated from material mental concoctions and is established on the original platform of the eternal relationship between the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead as servant and master. This, in summary, is the purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement. Jyotiryataiva vodaka partiveshvada samira veganugatam vibhavyate evang samaya rachiteshvaso puman guneshura ganugato vimuhyati. When the luminaries in the sky, such as the moon, the sun, and the stars, are reflected in liquids like oil or water, they appear to be of different shapes, sometimes round, sometimes long, and so on, because of the movements of the wind. Similarly, when the living entity, the soul, is absorbed in materialistic thoughts, he accepts various manifestations as his own identity because of ignorance. In other words, one is bewildered by mental concoctions because of agitation from the material modes of nature. This verse gives a very good example by which to understand the different positions of the eternal spiritual soul in the material world and how the soul takes on different bodies. Dehantara praptihi. The moon is stationary and is one, but when it is reflected in water or oil, it appears to take different shapes because of the movements of the wind. Similarly, the soul is the eternal servant of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when put into the material modes of nature, it takes different bodies, sometimes as a demigod, sometimes as a man, a dog, a tree, and so on. By the influence of Maya, the illusory potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity thinks that he is this person, that person, American, Indian, cat, dog, tree, or whatever. This is called Maya. When one is freed from this bewilderment and understands that the soul does not belong to any shape of this material world, one is situated on the spiritual platform, Brahma Bhuta. This realization is sometimes explained as nirakar, or formlessness. This formlessness, however, does not mean that the soul has no form. The soul has form, but the external agitating form he has acquired because of material contamination is false. Similarly, God is also described as nirakar, which means that God has no material form, but is Satchid Ananda Vigraha. The living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Satchid Ananda Vigraha, but his material forms are temporary, are illusory. Both the living entity and the Supreme Lord have original spiritual forms, Satchid Ananda Vigraha, but the Lord, the Supreme, does not change his form. The Lord appears as he is, whereas the living entity appears because material nature forces him to accept different forms. When the living entity receives these different forms, he identifies with them, and not with his original spiritual form. As soon as the living entity returns to his original spiritual form and understanding, he immediately surrenders to the Supreme Form, the personality of Godhead. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Bahunam janmanam mante jnanavan mam prapadyate. When the living entity, after many, many births in different forms, returns to his original form of Krishna consciousness, he immediately surrenders onto the lotus feet of the Supreme Form, Krishna. This is liberation. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 18:54, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kankshati sama sarveshu bhuteshu mar bhaktim labate param. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Surrender unto the Supreme Form is the result of bhakti. This bhakti, our understanding of one's own position, is complete liberation. As long as one is under an impersonal understanding of the absolute truth, he is not in pure knowledge, but must still struggle for pure knowledge. Klesho di karatas tesham avyakta sakta chesam. That's Bhagavad Gita 12:5. Although one may be spiritually advanced, if one is attached to the impersonal feature of the absolute truth, one must still work very hard, as indicated by the words klesho di karata, which mean greater suffering. Klesho di karata, greater suffering. A devotee, however, easily attains his original position as a spiritual form and understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original form. Krishna himself explains the forms of the living entities in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he clearly says to Arjuna, and all other living entities who are previous forms are separate individual identities. They were individuals in the past, they are now situated in individuality, and in the future, they will all continue to maintain their individual forms. The only difference is that the conditioned living entity appears in various material forms, whereas Krishna appears in his original spiritual form. Unfortunately, those who are not advanced in spiritual knowledge think that Krishna is like one of them, and that his form is like their material forms. Avajananti mamura manusham tanum ashritam. Krishna is never puffed up by mental knowledge and is therefore called achyuta, whereas the living entities fall down and are agitated by material nature. This is the difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities. In this connection, it is to be noted that Vasudeva, who was situated in a transcendental position, advised Kaṁsa to commit further sinful activities. Kaṁsa, a representative of the demons, was always ready to kill Krishna, or God, whereas Vasudeva represents a transcendentally situated person to whom Krishna is born. Vasudeva is a son of Vasudeva. So that long A is very important there. Vasudeva is the son of Krishna, of Vasudeva. Vasudeva wanted his brother-in-law Kaṁsa to refrain from the spiritual. Vasudeva wanted his brother-in-law Kaṁsa to refrain from the sinful act of killing his sister, since the result of being agitated by material nature would be that Kaṁsa would have to accept a body in which to suffer again and again. Elsewhere in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 5.5.4, Rishabhadev also says, Nasadhu manye yata atmano yang asan api klesha da asadeha. As long as the living entity is entangled in the fruit of activities of so-called happiness and distress, he will receive a particular type of body in which to endure the three kinds of suffering due to material nature, tritapa yantrana. An intelligent person, therefore, must free himself from the influence of the three modes of material nature and revive his original spiritual body by engaging in the service of the Supreme Person, Krishna. As long as one is materially attached, one must accept the process of birth, death, old age, and disease. One is therefore advised that an intelligent person, instead of being entangled in so-called good and bad fruitive activities, should engage his life in advancing in Krishna consciousness, so that instead of accepting another material body, taktva deham punarjanma naiti, he'll return home back to Godhead. Tasman kasyachid droham acharyat sa tata vidha atmanah kshemam atmanah kshemam anvicham drogdhur vai parato bhayam. Therefore, since envious, impious activities cause a body in which one suffers in the next life, why should one act impiously? Considering one's welfare, one should not envy anyone, for an envious person must always fear harm from his enemies, either in this life or in the next. Instead of being inimical toward other living entities, one should act piously by engaging in the service of the Supreme Lord, thus avoiding a fearful situation both in this life and in the next. In this regard, the following moral instruction of the great politician Chanakya Pandit is very meaningful. Tyaja durjana sangsargam bhaja sadhu samagamam kuru unyam ahoratram smara nityam anityatam. One should give up the company of devils, demons, and non-devotees, and should always associate with devotees and saintly persons. One should always act piously, thinking that this life is temporary, and not be attached to temporary happiness and distress. The Krishna consciousness movement is teaching all of human society of this principle of becoming Krishna conscious, and thus solving the problems of life forever. Takta deham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. Esha tavanuja bala kripana putrikopama hantum narhasi kalyanim imang tvam dinavatsala. As your younger sister, this poor girl Devaki is like your own daughter and deserves to be affectionately maintained. You are merciful, and therefore you should not kill her. Indeed, she deserves your affection. Shri Shuka uvacha evam sa samabhir bedhar bodhyamano pidaruna na nyavartataka koravya purushadan anuvrataha. Shukadev Goswami continued, O best of the Kuru dynasty, Kaṁsa was fiercely cruel and was actually a follower of the Rakshasas. Therefore, he could be neither pacified nor terrified by the good instructions given by Vasudeva. He did not care about the results of sinful activities, either in this life or in the next. Nirbandham tasyatam gyatva vichintya nakadundubihi praptam kalam prativyodhum idam tatranvapadyata. When Vasudeva saw that Kaṁsa was determined to kill his sister Devaki, he thought to himself very deeply. Considering the imminent danger of death, he thought of another plan to stop Kaṁsa. Purport. Although Vasudeva saw the imminent danger that his wife Devaki would be killed, he was convinced of his welfare. Because at his birth, the demigods had played drums and kettle drums. He therefore attempted another way to save Devaki. That's interesting. The demigods played kettle drums at his birth. Okay. Mrityur buddhi matapohyo yavad buddhi balodayam yadyaso na nivarteta na paradhosti dehina. As long as he has intelligence and bodily strength, an intelligent person must try to avoid death. This is the duty of every embodied person. But if death cannot be avoided in spite of one's endeavors, a person facing death commits no offense. Purport. It is natural for a person facing untimely death to try his best to save himself. This is one's duty. Although death is sure, everyone should try to avoid it and not meet death without opposition, because every living soul is by nature eternal. Because death is a punishment imposed in the condemned life of material existence, the Vedic culture is based on avoiding death. Takta deham punarjanma naiti. Everyone should try to avoid death and rebirth by cultivating spiritual life, and should not submit to death without struggling to survive. One who is not trying to stop death is not an intelligent human being. Because Devaki was face to face with imminent death, it was Vasudeva's duty to save her, as he was trying his best to do. He therefore considered another way to approach Kaṁsa so that Devaki would be saved. Pradaya mrityave putran mochaye kripanam imang sutame yadi jayeran mrityurva nam mriyeta chet viparyayo vakim nasyar gatir datu durataya. Oh shoot. 1 second. Okay. Viparyayo vakim nasyad gatir dhatur durataya upastito nivarteta nivrita punarapatet. Oh, actually that verse was okay. Vasudeva considered, by delivering all my sons to Kaṁsa, who is death personified, I shall save the life of Devaki. Perhaps Kaṁsa will die before my sons take birth, or since he is already destined to die at the hands of my son, one of my sons may kill him. For the time being, let me promise to hand over my sons, so that Kaṁsa will give up this immediate threat, and if in due course of time Kaṁsa dies, I shall have nothing to fear. Purport. Vasudeva wanted to save the life of Devaki by promising to deliver his sons to Kaṁsa. In the future, he thought, Kaṁsa may die or I may not beget any sons. Even if a son is born and I deliver him to Kaṁsa, Kaṁsa may die at his hands, for by providence anything could happen. It is very difficult to understand how things are managed by providence. Thus Vasudeva decided that he would promise to deliver his sons to the hands of Kaṁsa in order to save Devaki from the imminent danger of death. Agneryata daruviyo gayo gayor adrishtato jnana nimittamasti evang hi jantor api durvibhavya sharira sangyo gaviyoga hetu. When a fire, for some unseen reason, leaps over one piece of wood and sets fire to the next, the reason is destiny. Similarly, when a living being accepts one kind of body and leaves aside another, there is no other reason than unseen destiny. Purport. When there is a fire in a village, the fire sometimes jumps over one house and burns another. Similarly, when forest fire, the fire sometimes jumps over one tree and catches another. Why this happens, no one can say. One may set forth some imaginary reason why the nearest tree or house did not catch fire, whereas a tree or house in a distant place did. But actually, the reason is destiny. The reason is also this reason also applies to the transmigration of the soul, by which a prime minister in one life may become a dog in the next. The work of unseen destiny cannot be ascertained by practical experimental knowledge, and therefore one must be satisfied by reasoning that everything is done by supreme providence. Evam vimrishatam prapam yavaratmani darshanam pujayang asavai shorir bahumana purasaram. After thus considering the matter as far as his knowledge would allow, Vasudeva submitted his proposal to the sinful Kaṁsa with great respect. Prasana vadanam bhojo nrishangsam nirapatrapam manasadu yamanena vihasan idamabravit. Vasudeva's mind was full of anxiety because his wife was facing danger. But in order to please the cruel, shameless, and sinful Kaṁsa, he externally smiled and spoke to him as follows. Purport. Sometimes one must act duplicitously in a dangerous position, as Vasudeva did to save his wife. The material world is complicated, and to execute one's duties, one cannot avoid adopting such diplomacy. Vasudeva did everything possible to save his wife for the sake of begetting Krishna. This indicates that one may act duplicitously for the purpose of saving Krishna and his interests. According to the arrangement already foretold, Krishna was to appear through Vasudeva and Devaki to kill Kaṁsa. Vasudeva, therefore, had to do everything to save the situation. Although all the events were prearranged by Krishna, a devotee must try his best to serve the purpose of Krishna. Krishna himself is all-powerful, but it is not that a devotee should therefore sit idly and leave everything to him. This instruction is also found in Bhagavad Gita. Although Krishna was doing everything for Arjuna, Arjuna never sat down idly as a non-violent gentleman. Rather, he tried his best to fight the battle and be victorious. All right, that's our reading for today. Let's see, what's tomorrow? Tomorrow, okay, so Vasudeva pacifies Kaṁsa, but the attempt fails, and so then Vasudeva rethinks. So that's what we read today, and then tomorrow, Vasudeva pacifies Kaṁsa again, and then Vasudeva will give his first child to Kaṁsa, Kirtiman. And Narad Muni provokes Kaṁsa, and then Kaṁsa kills 6 children. That's what we're going to read about tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashata Rashata Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Shri Gurudev ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashata Rashata Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashata Rashata Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitilapa Vishtam Vishnupad Shatarashatashmar Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj ki jai. Nitilapa Vishtam Vishnupad Shatarashatashmar Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada ki jai. Nitilapa Vishta Maha Bhagavat Shila Gorksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitilapa Vishta Shila Satchitaranda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nitilapa Vishta Vaishnav Sarva Bhoma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Bhatta Dashagunath Shar Gosai Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vraja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kund ki jai. Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya ki jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashacha Krishna Bhakti Padadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat pranams, everybody. And I haven't, what do you think? Tell me what you think. I'm thinking after every reading on, I'm going to, like after every chapter, from Srila Prabhupada's purports, then I will read a chapter from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And then, so yeah, we'll finish this first chapter, then we'll go back and start the first chapter again. I won't read the Sanskrit though, I'll just read the translation and purports of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And then, yeah, what do you think of the idea? Because once we get to the 13th, Srila Prabhupada's purports will end at the 13th chapter. And so then we can continue on from the 13th chapter onwards with just reading Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purports. And so, oh, one thing I wanted to let you guys know is I'm going to be sending out, I think tomorrow I'll be sending, or maybe today, I'm going to be sending out an email to all these paying subscribers. I have two things. I have Vine of Devotion and I also have a Patreon account. And what I'm going to be sending out to all the paying subscribers is every month. So I have 3 different tiers. One is the Kshetra Mandal tier, which is $2 a month. Then I have the Gaura Mandal tier, which is $5 a month. And then I have the Vraj Mandal tier, which is $10 a month. And so, I mean, the main thing of this is just to make it so that I can stay here in the Mott, and because I pay rent here actually every month because I have a room here, and also I have a few different subscriptions I have for this Vine of Devotion website. I have my Wi-Fi. I have a few different things like that, and so I'm going to. So that's really what the main thing is to help support all these different things going on in my seva like that. But the benefit for being one of the paid subscribers is that on the first tier, the $2 tier, I will send you 1 kirtan a month. Any kirtan, like I'll make a video for you. And so you can go through and just give me any song that you want to learn. And then I will make a video for you every month. And then the Gaura Mandal plan, which is $5 a month, I will send you 2 kirtans of your choice. Any bhajan that you want to learn how to sing. And then on the Vraj Mandal plan, I will send 4 kirtans every month of any song that you want to sing. I'll make a video for you. So if you want to have that, then you can just go to vineofdevotion.com and click subscribe. And actually, you get 2 months free if you pay for a year. Like you'll see there on Vine of Devotion when you click subscribe, or if you already subscribed but you're not on any of the plans, then you can click, I think it says upgrade or something like that. And then you can see if you give for 1 year, then you get 2 months for free. So already some of you, Rohit Radhakrishnan ji and some other devotees. Madhavi Didi, I don't think she subscribed, but she's also given quite, so I'll add her to that also. Yeah, anyways, just letting you know if you're interested in that and getting new kirtans every month. All right, Dandavat pranams everybody. Oh, and Hari Bol Kishore Prabhu and Yashji, Jai Shri Radhe. Okay, Rohit Radhakrishnan ji. Dandavat pranams everybody.